history, right? It's like no, sometimes it feels like one big do-over, like somebody hit the reset button and tried again.
Yes, definitely.
And today's deep dive, we're tackling a huge rewrite, how the United States tossed out its first government, the Articles of Confederation, and went for round two with the Constitution.
And it's way more than just a history lesson. I mean, if we really get what happened back then, it's like a user manual for why our government works the way it does today, even the weird parts.
Totally. Like trying to figure out why your car is making that clunking sound, you got to look under the hood, right? See what the original mechanics were up to. So Articles of Confederation, what went so wrong that they had to scrap the whole thing?
Well, think about it. Brand new country, just fought a war for independence, huge GE debts piling up, but also super wary of anyone getting too much power. They'd just escaped that. So the articles were designed to be weak on purpose.
Yeah, that tracks. But how weak are we talking? Like, couldn't agree on dinner week, or was it a whole other level of dysfunction?
More like, couldn't pay the rent weak. Just imagine needing an army, right, for defense and all that. But instead of just, I don't know, having taxes or something, you had to go begging to each state individually, hoping they'd chip in.
Ouch. Talk about an awkward funding request. So, no national currency, no standing army. What else was on the list of things this government couldn't handle?
Trade was a nightmare. It was like every state was its own little country with its own currency, tariffs on goods from other states.
Yeah.
Complete chaos.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see why they went back to the drawing board. That's not just a glitch, that's a system failure.
Exactly. And the stakes were incredibly high. The whole world was watching to see if this American experiment would succeed or crash and burn.
High pressure, for sure. So we've got a brand new nation, barely hanging on, and the first attempt at a government is a total flop. Cue the dramatic music, because here come the Founding Fathers, ready to rewrite the future.
And not just any fathers, right? We're talking Washington, Madison, Hamilton, Franklin. These were heavy hitters, each with their own vision, their own personality. It's kind of amazing they agreed on anything.
Right. Like that room must have been electric, all that brain power, all those big personalities trying to build a government from scratch. And they actually pulled it off. There's got to be a story there. Can you imagine being a fly on the wall in that room?
Right.
I mean, you've got Washington, Mr. Serious himself, just by showing up, he's like, this is legit, folks.
Yeah, talk about setting the tone.
But then there's Madison taking notes the whole time. Like, did anyone else feel even slightly judged?
Well, we can thank him for that. Those notes, they're how we know what went down. Pure gold for history nerds like me.
Oh, for sure. But Madison wasn't just a note taker. He came ready to play, right? The Virginia plan, that was his brainchild.
It was. Didn't get adopted exactly as he wrote it, but it was the starting point for the whole debate. Set the agenda, you could say.
Okay, so Madison's got the ball rolling. Then you've got Hamilton, who's like, scrap it all. Let's build a superpower with a strong government.
Hamilton, yeah, he wasn't shy. He really believed in a strong national government. For him, it was the only way to make sure the country stayed together, had a stable economy, held its own on the world stage.
But didn't that freak people out? I mean, they just fought a war to get away from a king telling them what to do.
Definitely caused some tension in the room.
Yeah.
One of the biggest fights was about representation, how much say each state would have.
Because of the Virginia plan, that was all about population deciding how many votes you got.
Right. Big states loved it, obviously.
Yeah.
But the smaller states, they were used to having an equal voice under the Articles of Confederation. They weren't about to give that up without a fight.
I bet that got heated. It's not just about abstract ideas. It's about power, right? Who gets to call the shots?
Exactly. We're talking control over taxes, trade, the whole future of the country. For a while there, it seemed like the whole convention might just fall apart over this one issue.
So how'd they pull it back from the brink? Did someone order a giant pizza and tell everyone to chill out?
Well, there was a lot of backroom dealing, late night arguing, probably a few too many drinks involved.
Sounds familiar.
But in the end, they managed to hammer out a compromise, the Connecticut Compromise, or what some folks call the Great Compromise.
Okay, so what's so great about it?
They decided on a two-part legislature, a bicameral system, if you want to get fancy.
Hit me with the fancy words.
So you've got the House of Representatives, representation there. Based on each state's population, the more people you've got, the more votes you get. Makes sense, right?
Seems fair, at least to the big states.
But then, to keep those smaller states happy, they created the Senate. In the Senate, every state gets the same number of votes, 2 senators no matter what. Equal representation no matter how big or small you are.
Ah, so everybody got something they wanted. Sort of a win-win.
You could say that,
Yeah.
but it was more than just a quick fix. It created this whole system of checks and balances that would shape how power worked in the new government.
And, of course, we can't forget, the whole time this is going on, there's this other massive issue they're trying to avoid.
Oh, right. Because how do you square building a nation on freedom and equality when you've also got slavery?
So they're trying to build this idealistic nation, right, but then there's this whole other thing going on.
Yeah, slavery. It's like this huge asterisk on the whole all men are created equal thing.
And it wasn't just an ethical dilemma. It got all tangled up with political power, too.
Oh, absolutely. The southern states, they knew the game. More enslaved people meant more seats in Congress, more power to protect their interests, which, let's be real, revolves around slavery.
Okay, so how does that even fly? Did nobody in the North see the problem with counting enslaved people as, like, fractions of a person for political gain?
Oh, they saw it. These weren't dummies. The Three-Fifths Compromise, that was one of the most heated debates of the whole convention. It cut right to the heart of the whole slavery issue and the divisions between North and South.
Divisions that eventually led to the Civil War, right?
Yes, exactly.
So break it down for me. How'd they even arrive at this 3/5 number? Sounds like they pulled it out of a hat.
It was all about finding a number everyone could grudgingly accept. At first, the South wanted to count each enslaved person as a whole person.
Bold strategy.
Right. Maximize their voting power. But the North, they were like, hold on. These are human beings we're talking about, not political pawns.
Yeah, you can't really argue with that.
So they compromised on 3/5, which, let's be honest, is still messed up. It's like saying, sure, they're people, but only 3/5 is important.
A pretty dark compromise when you think about it.
No doubt. And it had huge consequences. It gave the South way more power than they should have had, shaped national policy for decades, and just made the whole slavery issue that much more volatile.
It's almost like the compromise itself made things worse in the long run.
In a way, it did. But it's important to remember, the Constitution, for all its flaws, was still a huge step forward. It created a framework for a stronger, more unified nation. And, crucially, it had a way to change, to adapt, with amendments.
It wasn't perfect, but it was a start.
Right. And that's where the ratification debate comes in. Because even with a new constitution, not everybody was on board.
Here come the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists, round
It
one.
was a battle of ideas. You had the Federalists, like Hamilton, who were all about this strong central government. But then the Anti-Federalists, they were suspicious. They just fought a revolution to get away from a king.
So they weren't just being difficult, they had real concerns.
No, totally. They were worried about individual rights, about the government becoming too powerful, too distant from the people.
And that's where the Bill of Rights comes in, right?
Exactly. The Anti-Federalists, they said, if you want this Constitution to work, you got to promise to protect individual freedoms. Put it in writing.
It's crazy how relevant that still is today. That whole balance between individual freedom and the power of the government, we're still figuring it out.
It's a constant tension.
So what the Federalists say about this Bill of Rights? Did they just cave?
It was a tough call for them. Some were against it. They thought if you listed certain rights, it implied that others weren't protected.
I see their point.
But in the end, they knew they needed the Anti-Federalists on board to get the Constitution ratified.
Compromise the name of the game.
Right. So they agreed to add a Bill of Rights as amendments.
And bam, freedom of speech, religion, the press, right to bear arms, all those core rights enshrined in the Constitution.
It was a huge win for the Anti-Federalists, and it changed the course of American history.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. This whole document, born out of arguments and compromises, has lasted for centuries.
It shaped not just America, but democracy around the world.
Wild, right?
And even though it's not perfect, those big questions about individual rights, about the role of government, they're still so relevant today. It makes you think.
It does. It's like, what does it really mean to be an American? How do we live up to these ideals?
Right. And how do we keep working to make those ideals a reality, even when it's hard?
Those are questions worth wrestling with. And hey, maybe next time you hear about a political debate, you'll hear echoes of those arguments the Founding Fathers were having.
Because it's all connected. It's not just history. It's the story of us.
It's been quite a deep dive, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. From those first fumbles with the Articles of Confederation to the drama of the Constitutional Convention to those compromises that are still shaping our lives.
It's a reminder that history isn't just dates and names in a textbook. It's the foundation we're all standing on.
And it's up to us to keep building on it.